get disrespectful with my officers, I will remove your soul from your body.
Today we talk about when it's time to intervene with a fellow officer. Quality trained security officers and virtual officers. Welcome to the Titan Use of Force debrief, where we break down security officers in the wild and review game film. I would say we watch these clips and give our comments and expertise on what we're seeing. This one is a little bit different. This is not a security officer, but a police officer dealing with this. And I thought it was interesting because it's certainly one that comes up with security officers. I don't think it's specific to security or law enforcement. But I won't give away too much. We'll jump right into this. I want to get your thoughts on it, and let me know what you think.
Don't ever touch me again. Get the off.
For the first time, we're hearing exactly what happened back in November when Sunrise Police Sergeant Christopher Police grabbed the throat of another officer.
Hold on, I got a cramp in my leg. Hold on, my leg.
The entire situation started when officers were responding to reports of a fight and a battery. But the man they were looking for, Jean Similien, was being uncooperative and even threatening.
If I open fire on 1, 2, and 3, I told y'all.
So are you threatening? Are you threatening us with that? I'm just saying, are you?
Similien was eventually taken into custody, but he struggled with officers who were trying to get him into the back of a police car.
In the car.
That's when Sergeant Police, a 21-year veteran of the department, pulled up and escalated things, pointing pepper spray at Similien, who was already in the back seat, and threatening him.
You want to play? You ever get disrespectful with my officers, I will remove your soul from your body.
It's at that moment that the female officer, who had only been with the department about 2 years at the time, ran up and pulled Police back by his belt. He responds by grabbing her throat before moving his hand to her shoulder.
Sir. Get the off.
Police walks away briefly before coming back and saying this.
Everybody turn off their cameras.
So, well, let's start with the officer pulling him off. Was that an appropriate move?
Absolutely. I'm extremely proud of her.
Right.
The subject's already in custody. I mean, shut the door.
Right.
You know, end it. And
We're bringing the fight. We're continuing to bring the fight to somebody who's in handcuffs and who's obviously upset. And that, too, for me, I think of the culture at the department. That's a supervisor showing up on the scene. And then he ends that by saying, everybody turn your camera off.
Oh, I was getting to that. Yeah.
That's a bad
look. I'm absolutely good with what she did and how she addressed it. And she
that took guts.
Yeah.
You got to hand it to her, and it was the right move.
Yes.
And especially when there were several other officers just sitting there, kind of, what do we do?
And the thing is sometimes crowds will have a tendency to do that, including police officers and security officers, is stand around and watch, especially when the guy barking and pushing is the biggest dog on the block.
And the supervisor, the one with stripes on their sleeve.
Yeah, he not only is a large man, but he's also the boss.
So what about the George Floyd incident with the 3 other officers? Do you feel like those 3 officers should have intervened and pulled Derek Chauvin off of George Floyd?
I think those 3 officers probably should have arrested Derek Chauvin right there. You don't do that.
Right.
That's archaic. Even when I've heard, which is maybe been out of the million conversations I've had about that, I've had maybe one law enforcement officer pull out, well, maybe he was trying to, dude, no. We just weren't taught that way, and we weren't taught that way. I mean, even in the late 90s when you started, we weren't taught that way.
Well, that was my other point. There is not a ton of training on what to do in a situation where your partner, your backup, your boss, their emotions are running high and you need to intervene and de-escalate. Because that situation, I mean, it happens. It can go south. How do you deal with that type of thing? How do you jump into it? I mean, the other side of that George Floyd thing is one of those officers was his 2nd or 3rd day.
Yeah, Brandon.
And Chauvin was his FTO.
Yeah. But, the thing of it is 2nd, 3rd day, new guy, young guy, old guy, veteran guy. I think we both, and I think all of us go to bed every night knowing what's right and wrong.
Sure.
Yeah.
No. I'm not justifying it.
No,
I'm saying
I
think the failure is in training and addressing and giving them the tools to how to deal with that and what to do. Because I think there's a lot of situations like that where I don't know if there's enough intervention in it, and I don't know if the tools are being given to the officers to know how to navigate through that.
And look, I've seen hundreds of videos where, an officer is struck or assaulted, and then he reacts in a manner that probably it would not be the want of the administrator. Maybe he throws a closed hand punch or something like that in defense of himself after he's been assaulted. That heat of the moment thing is something that I would never say. I'm not giving it an excuse. I'm just saying those things happen. These are human beings that we're dealing with. What makes this stand alone? What makes Derek Chauvin stand alone is in the video I saw of the suspect in the back of the vehicle, the back of the cruiser. He is no longer a risk or a threat to anybody standing there. Shut the door.
Right.
And to Mr. Floyd, who was on the ground,
the fight's already done. Why are we
doing
it?
this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even I read a security report in the last 3 days where our officers were involved in a fight. The person continued fighting to where that assaulted the officer. We ended up cuffing the subject and set them down. The subject starts to kick and stuff, and then the subject rolls onto their belly because officers are getting kicked away. The officers took control of the suspect and sat the person up, just like they are taught in training by Instructor Sparks, to make sure that chest cavity is staying open, to make sure that there's air going in and out, and to ensure that we're not putting weight on somebody like that. And these are security officers that got a week of training, which is way above, the national average. These are police officers that get 6 months of training, hopefully,
Right.
and they're reacting in this manner. Again, I do want to say it's a human job. It is a
Right.
human job, and you're going to find somebody with a bad temper or who lost their temper that day.
Right, and I think that's you got to look like, who knows what this pattern is. If this guy, if everybody that works with him knows and go, yeah, I could have predicted that, or that's out of character for him.
Yeah,
who knows? But I think that's too, when we talk about George Floyd and some of the other police reform stuff. I think it boils down to this type of stuff of there is a much higher level of expectation out of trained police officers that are dealing with these types of situations, that if emotions get involved and that can't be throttled or kept, that's where things can escalate to a bad place. And I think, luckily, I never had a scenario like that, other than that car check. And even in that scenario, this guy ran through a school zone where there were kids everywhere, and so by the time they caught him, it was kind of those, you son of a bitch, how did you do that? But enough people were involved that they just kind of tapped him out and said, let us hop in and do this, and he kind of collected himself. I never had an issue where I was like, or worked with somebody.
I have that exact one.
Is that the lightning one?
Yeah. That was one where the subject was already in custody. It's very similar. He was already in custody, and he was, for lack of a better term, he was talking some shit to the officer, and
it was you take these cuffs off and I'll whoop your ass.
See what's up. Yeah.
And he took the cuffs off.
And he took them off.
Yeah.
And what I did was put the cuffs back on and shut the door. Put them back in and shut the door. Right. And
well, that story is an interesting one. I mean, because once that officer took the cuffs on and said, "All right, cuffs are off," you figure out when the guy knuckled up, he drew a taser.
Absolutely, yeah.
That wasn't let me. I mean, when it got rode,
and the thing is
I forgot about that. That is a good example.
That was a tough one. And what I did is it wasn't tough to see it was wrong. I mean, that was pretty damn obvious to see that it was wrong, but it was, you caught somebody on a bad temper day, and you talked all this shit, and then this officer didn't control his emotions, and it cost him. And the thing is and that's one of those ones where you can almost feel like a punch to your gut, because you know how wrong it is, and then when you got to pick up the phone and call a supervisor and say, "This is what just went down. I want you to be aware of this." And
that's what happened, right? After the follow-up of that, you intervened. You got the suspect back in custody.
Yeah.
I think you kind of went to that officer and said, "What are you doing?"
Yep.
And his response was, "Don't worry, my camera was off."
That's what I'm saying. It's this exactly.
It is.
Yeah.
I forgot it. I totally forgot about that. To which you said, Yours was off. Mine was on.
I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm not sitting here trying to act like some angel. I've made tons of mistakes.
But that's tough, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I as much as I get what you're saying, but that is really tough to go, you were wrong. Yeah, and then you called a supervisor and said,
called
here's
his
what we got.
supervisor and called mine.
Right.
Yeah, because it was a neighboring department, and I called
If
his.
your camera was off, say you pulled up on that, there was no record of that, are you still calling the supervisor? Did you feel compelled to call the supervisor because you knew it was on tape or because you knew it was right?
I think the best way to put that is, number one, yes, I'm calling everybody. I don't think that I had any choice in the matter, and what I mean by I didn't have any choice in the matter is just the way that I'm built. The suspect, when he got him back to the station, he looked at me and he said, "I can see on your face how wrong that was. I can see it on your face."
And it was.
And it
That's
was.
the stuff.
It almost like you saw a ghost.
Right.
It's almost like you saw a ghost because it just, you're like, did that just happen?
I forgot about that. You're right. That's that exact
scenario. And some, listen, we're real big on our episodes here of pointing out training. And I'll steal from Jocko and say, our security officers, our cops, we need to be training 25% of the time. 25%. When we're not working, we need to be training 25% of the time. The industry doesn't allow us to do that on either side of that coin.
Right.
Either side of that coin. But that's what we should be doing. But there's training pitfalls. This is character pitfalls.
Yes.
This is an angry
Right. I
man.
highly doubt that's the first scenario
Right.
where his temper has shown.
If you're willing to,
Now, that's unfair because we don't have any other.
right.
That could have been a really bad day. Who knows? Maybe his wife left him that
Maybe
morning
so,
or
yeah.
something. But
the thing of it is the officer in my scenario where I did that, I was a lot bigger than the officer who did that, and I was able to basically put my arm on his shoulder, move him back a couple, take the cuffs, hook up the suspect, set him down in the vehicle, and shut the door. And I was able to physically control that scene. She's fantastic. I'll hire her.
Yeah.
I'll hire her.
that's character.
That
That's
young
integrity.
Lady, yep. That young lady's somebody who's going to keep your police department out of trouble.
Right. Yes.
Absolutely. She's
Yes.
going to keep your.
That's the antidote
Yep.
to, I think, what the challenge is or what the problem is. So hats off to her for stepping in. That took
a lot of guts.
That took guts, especially in front of all the other officers and everything else that was
Yep.
going on. On your situation, you called the supervisors, people got involved. What ultimately ended up happening with that?
It ended up being a lengthy suspension. It is what it ended up being, to my recollection. It was, if I remember right, it was a lengthy suspension is how that was addressed.
Right.
And that's all. Because it was another department, I was backing another department.
Right.
It was their internal issue to deal with.
How was your relationship with that officer? Did you ever work with him back on the street again?
I did. And you know what? Now, funny that you said that. He actually did say to me, "I'm sorry that I ever put you in that position." He did say that. Didn't say he was sorry about doing it.
I was going to say.
Yeah,
right.
did say
Not
he was
sorry about
doing it. But he did make the statement, "I'm sorry I put you in that spot."
You called me after that happened.
I was freaked out,
remember.
dude.
Yeah, I remember it was those are not easy.
Well,
those are,
and the other problem was his lieutenant was still is a dear friend of mine.
and probably one of the highest integrity people that I've ever worked with that would absolutely not.
I
not
was
let
just
that
thinking about.
slide.
I was thinking about that department's legacy of those two lieutenants.
Right.
You know the two that I'm speaking of. I mean, what shining examples of just good people,
Right.
and that would do the right thing. And I remember when he said to me when I called, and he said, "I can't imagine how tough this was for a guy like you. Thank you so much for calling me."
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you want to go out every day thinking that, hey, this is a football team. We're
Right.
part of this team and stuff like that. But this player on my team, he shouldn't
Right.
be doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought she did a fantastic job,
I thought she was
especially
phenomenal.
took
Yeah.
guts with other people around her and watching, seeing that. I don't know what will happen with that sergeant. I would imagine there's other incidents like that, although that's probably unfair to say. We don't know anything about what's going on there. I think for us, it was the choke grab for me that
Sure.
I think's unforgivable.
I
and,
agree. I agree. I think that You know, when you're showing, and you said it, you know, the culture of it, you know, because it didn't just stop with the bad guy, which it should never happen in the first place, but he has it laid out all over the place. So that's kind of his culture, is that anger and that temper. And I think that would have been a fatal flaw at most all police departments and security companies.
Yeah. That's our supervisor at Titan. Is that a survivable event, or what would you do if that was your supervisor?
If you take the choke out of it, if she pulls him away and he goes with that and walks back to the dugout, then I would probably listen to his story.
Right.
I would probably hear him out. But you've said it yourself. What prior incidents do we have? What other issues have we had?
And what's his take? If he's like, oh, she shouldn't have never pulled me,
right,
then you're out of here.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
But if it's I screwed up, my wife left me this morning, it was out of character for me. I think you have some anger management issues to deal with, but my overall assessment is that's probably somebody that should not be wearing a uniform or in a position of authority.
Absolutely. And if he did come up with that this is out of character, we don't have previous incidents, and he comes up with that he's had, the most awful of days, I'm going to let him know what we are going to do as a company or as a department, but I also need to know what he's going to do as a human being to get this under control.
Right. I agree. That's our take on it. If you have any questions, comments, other thoughts, please let us know. Anything else?
That's it. We'll see you next time.
Got it.